When the world goes quiet, some voices still remain. Not every soul finds peace when the clock strikes 12. There are stories hidden in the shadows, whispers drifting between the living and the forgotten. Some stories linger, some souls don't leave. Welcome to Stillness After Midnight, where every silence tells a story. If you're drawn to the mysteries that stir after dark, the voices that echo when the world sleeps, subscribe now and join us as we listen to the souls who still have something to say, because in the stillness, the truth finally speaks. I arrived in Seoul on an autumn evening when the air was sharp enough to sting my lungs and the neon lights bled into the darkness like bruises across the city skyline. For years I had wandered from place to place, chasing stories like some people chase storms, and for reasons I could not entirely explain, the Han River called to me. Writers are often drawn to places that carry whispers, places that cling to the edges of history and myth, places where the past still lingers in the present. I suppose I was no different. At first I thought it was just the bridge. The Han River Bridge stretched across the water like a steel spine, a landmark I had seen in countless photographs before I set foot in Korea. To the casual eye, it was simply an artery of the city, ferrying cars and people from one shore to another. But standing there for the first time, I felt something else. An undercurrent that ran colder than the water beneath. The lights flickered faintly along its length, and the wind off the river carried not just chill, but something more elusive, something like a sigh. That night I found myself in the backseat of a taxi, watching the bridge approach through the windshield. The driver was a man in his late 50s, his hair already graying at the temples, his hands steady on the wheel. He hummed an old tune under his breath, one I couldn't recognize, and for a while we drove in silence. Then as we neared the bridge, he stopped humming, and a curious heaviness seemed to fall over him. His shoulders stiffened, his eyes fixed on the road. It was I who broke the silence. "Beautiful bridge," I said. "I read that it looks even better at night." He didn't answer at once. Instead, he pressed harder on the accelerator, as if trying to outrun something unseen. Only when we were halfway across did he speak, his voice low, almost reluctant. "Beautiful, yes," he said in halting English. "But dangerous too. Some say cursed." The word hung in the air between us. "Cursed?" I leaned forward, curious. "What do you mean?" He shook his head, his eyes never leaving the road. "Not good to talk, not here." But I had come to Korea precisely for such stories. For years I had immersed myself in Western folklore, ghosts that rattled chains, spirits bound to castles and forests, but the East promised something different, something older, heavier with silence and ritual. So I pressed him. Finally he sighed. "There is woman, many drivers see her. Long hair, very long. She asks taxi, late night, always want to cross bridge, always disappear." A strange shiver traced my spine. Disappear? How? He flicked his eyes to the rearview mirror, as if expecting to see someone sitting beside me. At middle of bridge, no sound, no movement, just gone. Only wet hair left, seat wet. The car rattled over a seam in the bridge, and for a moment I thought I heard something, like the faint drip of water, though there was no rain. I chuckled nervously. "That's quite a story." But he didn't laugh. He only muttered something under his breath in Korean, a prayer maybe, before driving faster until we reached the far side of the bridge. Once off, his shoulders seemed to relax, and the tune returned to his lips, though quieter now, like a song sung for protection. Later that night in the small room I had rented near Itaewon, I could not stop thinking about his words. Only wet hair left. Such a detail clung to the imagination like a burr. I pictured it, strands of black hair, glistening with river water, abandoned on the cracked vinyl seat of a taxi. Who was she? Why did she vanish? And why, of all things, did her hair remain? The city around me thrummed with life, but inside my room, it felt like the walls leaned closer. I opened the window, letting in the hum of traffic and faint strains of laughter from the street below, trying to convince myself that I had simply met a superstitious man. Yet when I closed my eyes, I saw her, though I had never truly seen her. A shape behind me in the cab, a pale reflection in the glass, long, dripping hair trailing down like a funeral veil. The next day, curiosity tugged me back to the river. I walked along its edge in the late afternoon, when the sun began its descent and the water reflected streaks of crimson and gold. Joggers passed by, couples strolled with hands entwined, children rode bicycles along the paths, all oblivious to the weight that seemed to press down on me. It struck me as strange. How could a place so filled with life feel so saturated with death? I paused on the bridge, leaning over the railing. The Han was wide and restless, its currents pulling in the directions I couldn't quite follow. It wasn't difficult to imagine a body disappearing here, claimed by the depths, never to resurface. Perhaps that was all the story was, an echo of tragedy retold until it became ghost. But I couldn't shake the sensation that someone stood just behind me, close enough that if I turned my head I would meet her eyes. I didn't turn. Some instincts are older than logic. That evening I found myself in another taxi. This driver was younger, chatty, eager to practice his English. We spoke of food, of music, of the strange differences between our cultures. But as soon as we approached the bridge, the conversation dried in his throat, as if someone had closed a door between us. I asked him casually, "Have you ever seen her? The woman with long hair?" His hands tightened on the wheel. He glanced at me, then at the empty seat beside me. The road stretched dark ahead, the bridge lights flickering like lanterns in a storm. For a moment I thought he would deny it. But then, with a voice softer than the hum of the engine, he said, "Once." He told me about the night it happened. Rain hammered the city, and near midnight he picked up a woman on the south side. She was dressed in white, her hair soaked, clinging to her face. She gave no address, only asked to be driven across the bridge. He agreed. But when they reached the middle, he felt the weight in the back vanish. He turned. The seat was empty, except for strands of dripping hair and the scent of river water thick in the air. As he spoke, I noticed how his knuckles whitened on the wheel, how his breath came shallow, as though even memory was dangerous. When we reached my stop, he refused my money. "Do not ride alone," he said. "Not at night, not across the bridge." That night I dreamed. In the dream I sat once again in a taxi. The city lights blurred beyond the window, the hum of tires against asphalt steady as a heartbeat. The driver was faceless, nothing more than shadow behind the wheel. And behind me, her. I could feel the damp chill of her presence, smell the sharp tang of river water. I dared not turn. I only stared at the road ahead, endless, stretching into darkness. But then from the corner of my eye, I saw her hair. Long, black, glistening. It reached forward, curling over the seat, inching toward me like the fingers of something drowned. I woke with a start, my breath ragged, my sheets damp with sweat. Yet when I rose to splash water on my face, I found a single strand of black hair clinging to my pillow. Longer than my own, darker too, glistening as though freshly pulled from the river. And I lived alone. That was the first time I truly believed the stories. For in Seoul, the Han River whispers to those who listen, and if you linger long enough, if you ask too many questions, the woman with long hair may decide to answer. I had convinced myself that the strand of hair I found on my pillow was an accident, a coincidence. Perhaps it had clung to my coat, caught on the collar from some passerby in the street, and fallen as I slept. The mind, when desperate, will craft explanations the way children craft shadows into monsters. But that explanation did little to steady my nerves. By the second week of my stay in Seoul, I could not resist the pull of the Han River at night. In the day, the bridge looked ordinary enough, full of traffic, laughter, the endless shuffle of commuters. Yet when midnight fell, the place took on a different character. The city's pulse slowed, the air grew colder, and the lights above the water seemed to flicker in time with something unseen. I knew I was chasing a ghost, and still, I went. That night, I hailed a taxi from the northern side of the river. The driver was a broad-shouldered man in his 40s, his jaw set in a way that suggested he had no patience for chatter. His cab smelled faintly of cigarettes and pine air freshener, the kind that never quite masks the years of smoke embedded in the upholstery. "Where to?" he asked in Korean. I stumbled through the address in my halting Korean, and when he nodded, I added softly, "But could we go across the Han Bridge first?" His eyes flicked up to the mirror. "At this hour?" "Yes." I smiled as if it were nothing. "I'd like to see the view at night." For a moment he said nothing. Then he grunted and pulled onto the road. The city outside blurred into streaks of neon and shadow. As we approached the bridge, I noticed the subtle shift in his body. His hands tightened on the steering wheel, and his eyes fixed forward with a kind of grim determination. It was the same heaviness I had seen in the older driver before, the silence that grew too loud, the hum of the engine swallowing words. I leaned back, letting the rhythm of the tires lull me, and yet I could not shake the sense that the cab had grown heavier. Not visibly, no sound of doors opening, no rustle of clothing, just a shift, like an unseen passenger had settled into the seat behind me. The driver cleared his throat. "You are not from here." "No," I admitted. "I'm a writer. I've come for stories." A humorless chuckle escaped him. "Soul has many stories, not all safe to tell." He kept his eyes forward, but I could see his throat working, as if swallowing words he didn't want to speak. I let the silence stretch until the bridge lights rose ahead, glowing faint and pale against the darkness. Then I asked the question I knew I shouldn't. "Have you ever seen her?" The air in the cab thickened. The hum of the tires grew louder, like a drum beat in the bones. He did not answer right away. Instead, he pressed his foot harder to the pedal, as if speed could shield him from memory. Finally, he said, almost in a whisper, "Not with these eyes, but my friend. He saw." I waited, heart drumming. He told me about his fellow driver, a man named Min Ho, who had worked the night shift for years. One rainy evening, Min Ho picked up a woman near the riverbank. Her hair was long, plastered to her face with water, her white dress clinging to her body. She gave no address, only said in a soft, hoarse voice, "The bridge. Take me across the bridge." Minho drove, the windshield wipers fighting against the torrent, the city blurred into watery streaks. He avoided looking at her in the mirror, something in his gut telling him not to. But halfway across, he heard the sound. Drip, 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 like water striking the seat. He glanced back, and the seat was empty. Only strands of soaked hair remained, coiled like snakes on the vinyl, still dripping though the rain was outside. When he turned forward again, the road seemed longer than it should have been, the bridge stretching endlessly into shadow. And somewhere behind him, though the seat was empty, he swore he heard the faint sound of breathing. By the time he reached the far end, the woman was gone entirely. Minho never drove nights again. The driver telling me this fell silent after that. His grip on the wheel whitened his knuckles. I wanted to ask more, but the weight in the cab told me not to push. Some silences are warnings, not absences. The bridge itself stretched around us. The water below, black and restless. The street lamps above flickered weakly, each one casting more shadow than light. And there, halfway across, I felt it again. The shift, the heaviness, the certainty of another presence. I glanced to the mirror. For a moment, no longer than a blink, I saw it. Not a full face, not even a form, but the impression of hair, black and wet, trailing over the seat behind me. By the time I blinked, the seat was empty again. My breath caught. I told myself it was a trick of light, a tired mind, the way shadows play when one stares too long. But the smell lingered, the faint tang of river water, sharp, metallic, impossible to mistake. The driver did not look back, did not slow. His jaw tightened, his silence an armor. When we reached the far side of the bridge, he exhaled, long and trembling, as if surfacing from deep underwater. "Not good to ride alone," he muttered, echoing the words I had heard before. "Especially not here." I paid him, my hands shaking as I fumbled with the bills. He drove off quickly, tires screeching slightly as if eager to leave the place behind. Back in my rented room, I could not sleep. Every creak of the building, every distant honk of traffic became amplified. I sat by the small desk, notebook open, but my pen hovered uselessly over the page. I could only replay the image in my mind. The strands of hair I swore I saw in the mirror, the weight that pressed on the air like a hand on my chest. Around 3 in the morning I heard it, a sound soft, deliberate, the clack, clack of wooden shoes, faint but distinct, echoing down the corridor outside my room. They stopped right at my door. I held my breath. The silence that followed was thick, suffocating. Then slowly a single drop of water rolled from the top of the door frame, trailing down the wood. I did not open the door. Some part of me knew that if I did, I would not be writing this story now. When dawn came, pale and thin, I opened the door to find the hallway dry. No footprints, no water, no trace of the sound. Only a single black hair, long and wet, lying across the threshold like a warning. And so, I knew. The stories were not just stories. They were invitations, and I had already accepted. The nights after my first crossing of the bridge blurred into one another. I slept little, and when I did, the dreams clung to me like cobwebs, sticky and unshakable. In every dream there was water, cold, black, restless. Sometimes I stood on the edge of the Han, watching the current swirl with voices I could not understand. Other times I was already in the river, hair wrapping around my wrists, pulling me down. Always, just before I drowned, I woke gasping. Exhaustion pushed me toward a dangerous curiosity. I had begun to realize that this story of the long-haired woman was not a tale confined to hushed whispers. It was a wound in the city, carried quietly by those who made their living in the late hours. Taxi drivers especially. If anyone knew more, it would be them. So one evening, I found my way to a narrow alley near Yongno, where I had heard that cab drivers gathered to eat, smoke, and share stories between shifts. The place was nothing glamorous. A dim tavern with plastic stools and the scent of soju heavy in the air. The glow of fluorescent lights made every shadow look deeper, every wrinkle sharper on the men's faces. When I entered, conversation slowed, the way it always does when a foreigner intrudes into a space not meant for tourists. But the promise of money and my stilted Korean softened their suspicion. I ordered drinks for the table nearest me, and soon enough, the silence broke. The first man who spoke was older, his cap pulled low, his voice gravelly from years of cigarettes. He told me he had never seen the woman himself, but he knew men who had. "It is always the same," he said, pouring soju into a chipped glass. "She is quiet, never angry, never screaming, only sitting, always at night, always on the bridge." Another driver, younger, with restless eyes, leaned forward. "Not always quiet," he said. "Once I heard she cried." The driver said the sound was like a funeral, soft but heavy. He looked back and saw her shoulders shaking, her hair hiding her face. He pulled over, tried to ask what was wrong, and then she was gone, just gone. The seat was wet, but the window never opened. The men nodded as though such things were ordinary, like traffic lights or bad weather. I pressed gently. "Do you know who she is? Was?" The room stilled. For a moment no one spoke. Then the younger man shrugged. "No one knows. Some say a bride who drowned. Some say a girl who was betrayed. Others say, she is not one woman. She is all of them. Every soul lost to the river becomes her." The idea chilled me more than any ghost. A spirit not of one life, but of many, an echo of suffering layered upon suffering. As the night wore on, stories multiplied. Each man had his own version, each tale another thread woven into a shroud of fear. One driver, his eyes distant with memory, swore he had once found a strand of hair knotted into his wallet days after an encounter. Another claimed he had seen handprints on his fogged window, though he had been alone. But it was the last man, silent until then, who gave me something tangible. He was tall, thin, with deep creases etched into his face like lines carved by years of silence. When the others had finished, he reached into his jacket and pulled out a small leather wallet, worn with age. From inside, he slipped a folded tissue. With care, he opened it on the table. There, in the fluorescent light, lay several strands of hair. Black, long, still faintly glossy, as though damp. The men at the table looked away, muttering prayers under their breath. He met my eyes. "I drove her," he said simply. His Korean was slow enough that I could follow every word. 5 years ago, she was in the seat behind me. I felt the car grow colder. I dared not look, but I could see her in the mirror. Only hair, nothing more. At the middle of the bridge, the seat was empty. But these, he touched the strands gently, were left. I could not throw them away. It is proof. Proof that I did not imagine it. I reached out, hesitant, but stopped before touching. The hair seemed to pulse with its own presence, as though it remembered the scalp it once belonged to. A faint smell reached me. River water, faintly metallic, faintly rotten. The man folded the tissue again, tucked it away, and lifted his glass. "She is real," he said. "Too real, and if you keep asking, she will know your name." The others nodded. Conversation shifted back to lighter things, but my thoughts remained heavy. I felt as if I had been given a warning and a gift in the same breath. When I left the tavern, the air outside was damp, fog curling along the alleys like smoke from an invisible fire. I walked slowly, the night pressing close. My ears caught every sound: the distant bark of a dog, the murmur of television behind thin apartment walls, the faint slap of water against the riverbank far off. As I turned onto the main street, I passed a shop window where old televisions glowed faintly in the dark. For just a second, in the reflection of the glass, I thought I saw her, a figure standing behind me, long hair dripping, face hidden. I spun around. The street was empty, but when I looked back at the reflection, she was still there. The glass trembled as if touched from the other side. Then slowly, the image dissolved into the ordinary reflection of myself, pale and shaken. I hurried back to my room, trying to tell myself I was tired, that whiskey and stories had twisted my senses. But as I closed the door, something caught my eye. On the desk where I had left my notebook, a single strand of black hair lay coiled across the page. Wet, and written in the damp smudge beneath it, as if drawn by invisible fingers, was one word in English: wait. That night I did not sleep at all. I had begun to notice the way people looked at me when I asked about her. At first it was curiosity, a kind of indulgence they offered to a foreigner dabbling in stories. But as the night stretched on and my questions became sharper, the look shifted. Taxi drivers avoided my eyes. Shopkeepers grew quiet. Even the tavern men who once shared tales now turned away when I entered, as if my presence carried something they wished not to touch. It was as though, by speaking her name aloud, I had made myself a vessel for her. Still, I could not stop. A writer's curse, perhaps, to mistake danger for inspiration. And so I sought someone who might give me answers that were more than rumor. Through a colleague at the university, I was given the name of a scholar, Professor Yang, an elderly man known for his research into Korean folklore and urban legends. His office was tucked away in a quiet corner of a university district, a building older than the glass towers around it. When I climbed the stairs, the hall smelled faintly of dust and incense, and the walls were lined with bookshelves so heavy they seemed to bow under their weight. Professor Yang was waiting behind a desk cluttered with papers. His hair was thin and white, his glasses perched low on his nose. He greeted me politely, but with the distance of someone used to outsiders. his eyes narrowing slightly when I explained what I was seeking. "You've been asking about the woman on the Han Bridge," he said in measured English. It was not a question. "Yes," I admitted. "I've spoken to drivers, to people in the city. They all have stories, but nothing certain. I want to understand." He studied me for a long time, his fingers steepled beneath his chin. "Understanding is not always safe," he said. "In Korea, ghosts are not entertainment. They are memory. They are grievance. They are the weight of what is unfinished." I leaned forward. "Then tell me her memory." His eyes softened, but only slightly. "You must listen carefully. What I tell you is not confirmed by records. It is oral, passed from voice to voice. But in such things, the story is more important than the fact." He told me of a young woman many decades ago. Some said the 1960s, others earlier. She had been a bride, betrothed to a man of higher standing. On the day of her wedding, she crossed the bridge with her groom's family, but something happened. Betrayal, abandonment. No one agreed on the details. Some versions said the groom never arrived, leaving her humiliated. Others whispered he had chosen another woman, discarding her like an unwanted gift. Shamed, heartbroken, she threw herself into the Han River. Her white wedding dress spread across the current like a shroud. And because no proper rites were given, because her body was never retrieved, her spirit lingered. "She waits," Professor Zhang said quietly, "for a ride that will take her where she was meant to go, for a groom who never came. That is why she asked to cross, why she disappears at the middle. She is caught between shores." I shivered, though the room was warm. "And the hair?" He closed his eyes briefly, as if the question itself carried weight. "In our culture, hair is powerful. It is life. To cut hair was once a punishment. To lose hair, a sign of grief. For her to leave hair behind, it is not accident. It is a calling card, a mark. Those who find it have been touched by her." I thought of the strands I had seen, on the taxi seat, on my notebook, across my pillow. "Touched how?" Professor Yang looked at me sharply. "You have seen it." I hesitated. "Yes." He stood then, moving to a cabinet where he kept an old wooden box. From within, he drew out a small bundle wrapped in cloth. When he unwrapped it, I saw strands of black hair, brittle with age, tied with red thread. The smell was faint but unmistakable. River water, heavy and sour. "This," he said, "was given to me by a driver many years ago. He died not long after. Accident. Or maybe not accident." He rewrapped the bundle with great care, his hands almost reverent. "The hair means she knows you. If you have it, she can find you." A silence stretched between us, deep and suffocating. Finally, he leaned forward, his voice low. "You must stop. Do not ride across the bridge at night. Do not call to her. The more you seek her, the closer she comes. Curiosity is an offering she cannot resist." I wanted to heed him, but there was something in his words that did the opposite. The idea of a bride betrayed, abandoned, lingering forever between shores. It pierced me deeper than fear. It felt like tragedy given form, a story demanding to be told. Perhaps he saw the stubborn light in my eyes because he sighed heavily. "Writers," he said, shaking his head, "you think stories are yours to take, but some stories take you. If you are not careful, this one will." I left his office with the smell of incense still clinging to my clothes, the echo of his warning heavy in my ears. The city outside looked unchanged. Students laughing, buses rumbling, vendors calling their wares. But I felt as though I had stepped into another world, one in which every shadow might conceal her. That night, sleep eluded me again. I sat at my desk, staring at the blank page, the professor's words running circles in my mind. "If you have it, she can find you." At some point, exhaustion claimed me. I don't remember closing my eyes, only the sudden shift from lamplight to darkness. In the dream, I was back on the bridge. The river below churned, black and endless. Ahead of me stood a woman in white, her back turned. Her hair, impossibly long, trailed into the water, as if the river itself grew from her head. She turned slowly. I never saw her face. Her hair veiled it entirely, but I felt her gaze, cold and searching. And though her lips did not move, I heard her voice. You seek me. Now I seek you. I woke with a gasp, my throat tight. The lamp on my desk still burned, but the room was not empty. Across the floor, leading from the door to the desk, were strands of wet black hair, glistening faintly in the light. At the end of the trail resting on my notebook was a single word written in water. Soon. I did not sleep again until morning. The city has two faces, the one it shows under the sun and the one it bears after midnight. By day, Seoul is all movement and light, chatter spilling from cafes, buses groaning under the weight of commuters, neon signs competing for attention. But by night, when the traffic thins and the alleys fall silent, the city feels older. Ancient, even. It is in those hours I have learned that the past leaks into the present, and nowhere does that leak more than on the Han Bridge. I had told myself after the warning from Professor Zhang that I would stay away. I even believed it for a time. But curiosity is not so easily smothered. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her hair trailing into the river, her unseen face turned toward me. Every time I tried to write, I found myself circling back to her as though my pen had been claimed. So one night, against my better judgment, I hailed another taxi. The driver was young, no more than 30, with weary eyes and the jittery movements of a man who lived on too much coffee and too little sleep. His cab smelled faintly of fried food, the seats worn smooth by countless passengers. "Where to?" he asked in English when he heard my accent. I gave him the address. And then, almost as an afterthought, I added, "But first, the Han Bridge." He froze. Not for long, just half a breath, but I saw it. His knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. "You don't want that," he said. "Why not?" His eyes flicked to the mirror, meeting mine. "Because at this hour, I'm not the only one who rides with you." The cab grew silent. He didn't say more, but neither did he refuse. With a reluctant sigh, he pulled onto the road. The bridge loomed ahead, its arches lit by pale street lamps that seemed to flicker with every gust of wind. The Han River beneath was black glass, broken only by faint ripples that caught the glow of the lights. Halfway across, the driver stiffened, his eyes fixed forward, his hands trembling just slightly. I turned to ask what was wrong, then froze. I was not alone in the back seat. A woman sat beside me. Her head was bowed, her long black hair hanging in wet curtains that hid her face entirely. Water dripped from her dress, pooling onto the seat, soaking into the floor mat. The air grew colder, heavy with the metallic scent of river water. My breath hitched. I had no memory of the door opening, no sound of her arrival. One moment the seat was empty, the next she was there. The driver's voice cracked. "Don't look at her." But it was too late. I could not help myself. My eyes darted to her, searching for features beneath the veil of hair. For just an instant, I saw pale skin beneath, lips parted as though whispering words I could not hear. And then, nothing. She vanished. The seat beside me was empty once more, save for the spreading pool of water and a clump of hair clinging wetly to the fabric. The driver exhaled shakily, his forehead damp with sweat. "Now you see," he muttered. "Now you know why we don't drive this bridge at night." When we reached the far side, he pulled over abruptly. "Out," he said firmly. I obeyed. The cab sped off before I could protest, its taillights swallowed by the dark. I stood there alone, the chill of the encounter still wrapped around me. The city's noises seemed muted, as though the world itself held its breath. At my feet on the pavement lay a single strand of hair, black, wet. It clung to my shoe as though it had been waiting for me. Back in my room, I tried to convince myself it was hallucination, suggestion planted by too many stories. But when I removed my jacket, I found the sleeve damp, smelling faintly of river water, and on my wrist a thin red mark, as though fingers, cold and unseen, had gripped me tightly. Sleep would not come. I sat at the desk, staring at the notebook. The words she had written before, soon, seemed to echo in my mind. And then, without sound, the pages of the notebook fluttered open. A draft? A trick of air? Perhaps. But on the blank page, water seeped slowly upward, spreading into letters, forming words in English once again. You ride with me next. I closed the notebook, my hands trembling. The city outside was silent, but in that silence I swore I heard it. The faint clack, clack, clack of wooden shoes moving ever closer to my door. I did not leave my room the following day. The city outside lived its life as usual. Children's voices in the courtyard, vendors calling out steamed buns and fish cakes, scooters whining through the alleys. But to me, the world felt muffled, distant, as though I were sealed in a glass jar. Every sound bent inward, distorted, drowned by the memory of the woman who had sat beside me in the cab. Her presence had not been a story told by drunken drivers. It had not been rumor wrapped in superstition. She was real, terrifyingly, undeniably real. And worse, she knew me now. That evening, unable to bear the silence of the walls, I returned to Professor Zhang. He did not look surprised when I appeared at his office door. Perhaps he had been expecting me. He gestured for me to sit, then poured tea into small porcelain cups. The steam rose between us like a curtain. You've seen her, he said. I nodded. My voice cracked when I tried to speak. In the taxi. She sat beside me. She left something. What? Hair and words, written in water. The professor's face tightened. For a long time, he did not speak. Then he whispered almost to himself. The bride chooses. At my urging, he explained further. Long ago in the Joseon era, there had been a custom for brides to cross a river on their wedding day, symbolizing the journey from one family to another. Some drowned during storms or accidents. Others, shamed or betrayed, leapt by choice. Their spirits became restless, chained to the waters that swallowed them. She is one of them, the professor said. A bride unfinished. She never reached her husband's home, never completed the crossing, so she repeats it again and again, in search of what was denied her. And the passengers, I asked. Why taxis? Why drivers? He stirred his tea slowly. Because cars are the ferries of our time. The drivers are the boatmen. The bridge is the river's gate. She seeks passage across, but she can never complete it. So she takes again and again. Sometimes she chooses someone to follow. A chill spread through me. She's chosen me. His eyes behind the glasses were grave. Perhaps she sees something in you. A witness, a vessel, a voice, or perhaps only a companion for her endless journey. I wanted to deny it, to laugh it off as superstition, but the memory of wet hair clinging to my wrist would not let me. The professor leaned closer, his voice dropping. If she follows you, you must not let her in. Do not answer when she calls. Do not accept her ride. Once you sit beside her as companion, you will not leave the bridge again. But how do I stop her? There is no stopping, only distance. Leave this place. Leave the city. Forget her name. I knew, even as he said it, that I could not. My curiosity had already tethered me. Writers are parasites of memory. We feed on the stories we should leave untouched. And she was the darkest story I had ever encountered. That night I walked the streets aimlessly, the words unfinished bride echoing in my mind. Neon signs buzzed overhead, their light flickering against wet pavement. Couples laughed together in bars. The world of the living continued, indifferent. And then I heard it, the sound of wooden shoes. Clack, clack, clack. Slow, measured, each step too deliberate to belong to the living. I turned sharply, but the street behind me was empty. Only the long smear of shadows cast by street lamps. Yet the sound did not stop. It followed me. My pace quickened. The sound quickened too. Not echo, not coincidence. Pursuit. At the corner, I ducked into a narrow alley, the air colder there, damp with the smell of stone and mildew. The sound faded. I exhaled shakily, pressed against the wall. But when I lifted my eyes, I saw her, at the far end of the alley, a figure in white, hair spilling forward like a veil. Her body dripped water that pattered onto the stones. She stood impossibly still, yet the air around her seemed to ripple, as if distorted by her presence. My throat closed. I could not scream, could not move. Then slowly, she raised one hand, pale, wet, fingers curled as if beckoning. And in my head, not in my ears, but inside me, I heard her voice. Come, finish the crossing with me. I staggered back, stumbling into the street. A car horn blared as I nearly collided with a passing truck. By the time I regained balance, the alley was empty. Only a trail of water remained, dark against the stone. When I finally returned to my room, trembling and breathless, I found something waiting for me. On the desk lay a folded sheet of paper, though I had locked the door when I left. My notebook sat beneath it, damp around the edges. With dread, I unfolded the sheet. It was a wedding invitation. The paper was yellowed, edges curling, but the ink was fresh, glistening as though written moments ago. The names were in Korean script I could not read, except for one, mine, written clearly at the bottom where the groom's name should be. Beneath it, a drop of water spread slowly into the page, bleeding outward like a spreading stain of tears. That night I dreamed of her again, not on the bridge, but in a small room lit by paper lanterns. I sat dressed in wedding robes not my own, the air heavy with incense. She stood before me in her white gown, her face still hidden by hair. She leaned closer, whispering words that brushed against my skin like breath from the grave. Together we finish the crossing. Together we are bound. When I woke, the air of my room reeked of incense, and on the pillow beside me lay a veil. White, damp. I could not deny it any longer. She was not just haunting the bridge. She was crossing into my life, piece by piece, bringing her unfinished wedding to me, and I, unwilling or not, was becoming her groom. The veil did not vanish with the morning light. It remained on my pillow, pale and damp, as though it had followed me out of the dream. I touched it with trembling fingers. The fabric clung to my skin, cold, smelling faintly of river water. For hours I stared at it, unable to decide whether to keep it or destroy it. Part of me feared what might happen if I threw it away, that she would take offense, punish me for rejecting her gift. Another part feared what it meant to keep it, to accept the token of a bride unfinished. In the end, I folded it carefully and placed it inside the drawer of my desk. Not acceptance, not rejection, only postponement. The days blurred together after that. I no longer trusted the hours, no longer trusted the sun to separate night from day. Sleep came in broken fragments, each one filled with the sound of dripping water, the weight of her unseen gaze. Everywhere I went, I felt her near. At the marketplace, where the smell of grilled fish should have comforted me, I caught the scent of damp stone. In the library, where the pages of books whispered softly, I heard the distinct clack, clack, clack of wooden shoes. And always there was the hair, strands appearing in my pockets, across the floor of my room, tangled in the bristles of my toothbrush. Each one a reminder. She was not bound to the bridge alone. She was bound to me. I tried once more to speak with Professor Zhang. He listened silently, his face graver than before. She has chosen you, he said finally. That much is clear. The veil confirms it. What does she want? He leaned back, his gaze distant. A vow, a bond, to finish what was denied her, to make her wedding whole, even if the groom is unwilling. In your face, in your voice, perhaps she sees the shadow of the man who betrayed her. I shook my head. But I'm not him. To the dead, he replied softly. Such distinctions are thin. What matters is not who you are, but who you resemble in the dark. That night I awoke to the sound of water running. My heart lurched. I lived alone, and no tap was open. The sound came from the drawer where I had hidden the veil. Slowly I rose, each step heavier than the last. When I pulled the drawer open, the veil lay there, but it was soaked through, dripping steadily onto the floor. The wood beneath was warped, swollen from the moisture, and beneath the veil, etched into the drawer as if carved by invisible fingers, were words in Korean script. I could not read them, but when I traced the grooves with my hand, the meaning came unbidden, whispering into my mind. Our vow. The following evening, I avoided my room. I wandered through the city instead, searching for light, for noise, for anything that might drown the silence that clung to me. At a small tea house near Insadong, I found a group of old women gathered around a low table. They were gossiping, laughing softly, their hands busy with knitting. When they noticed me listening, one of them beckoned me closer. "You are the foreigner who asked about the bride," she said in halting English. I froze. "Yes." Their laughter died. The eldest among them leaned forward, her eyes sharp despite her years. "Be careful. Once she gives you her veil, you belong to her. That is the way of it. The veil is a promise." My voice cracked. "How do I break it?" The old woman shook her head. "There is no breaking, only finishing. If you wear the veil, if you speak the vow, you will follow her into the water. If you refuse, she will not forgive. She will take what she is owed." Her words fell heavy, final, no escape. That night I tried to fight sleep, but exhaustion won. I dreamed of the bridge again. This time it was not empty. Rows of lanterns lined the sides, their light trembling against the dark river. At the center of the bridge stood an altar draped in white, a table laid with offerings, fruit, rice, incense, and beside it she waited, the bride. Her gown clung wetly to her form, her hair still a curtain over her face. Yet I could feel her eyes through the strands, heavy with longing, heavy with demand. In her hands she held the veil. She raised it slowly, offering it to me. The river roared below, though no wind stirred. The lanterns flickered, their flames bending toward her as if drawn. I tried to step back, but my feet would not move. The bridge beneath me pulsed like a living thing, each vibration pushing me closer to her. Her voice seeped into me again, low and resonant, neither cruel nor kind. "One vow, one crossing. Finish with me." She lifted the veil higher. I reached out, unwilling, yet unable to resist. The fabric brushed my fingertips, wet and cold as though cut from the river itself. And then I woke. But the veil was no longer in the drawer. It was on my head, damp, heavy, binding. I tore it away with a cry, hurling it across the room. It landed in the corner, but when I blinked, it was gone. Only the floor remained wet, water spreading slowly across the boards. And faintly beneath the dripping, I heard it again. Clack, clack, clack. Footsteps, approaching my door. Morning brought no comfort. The sunlight that filtered through the curtains felt pale, sickly, as though even the day itself recoiled from my room. My floor was still damp from the night before, the boards swollen, warped by water that had no source. I searched every corner, every pipe, but the truth pressed heavier with each breath. It wasn't the house leaking, it was her. And worse, the veil was gone. Not misplaced, not hidden, simply gone, as though it had never existed at all, except for the cold smell of river water that lingered in the air. I tried to work. I sat at the desk, opened my notebook, and forced my pen to the page. But the words that spilled out were not mine. My hand trembled, as though guided by something beyond me. The sentences flowed in Korean script, symbols I could not read, yet my wrist moved with certainty, each stroke fluid, practiced, as though I had written them my entire life. When at last I stopped, gasping, my page was filled. I stared at the markings, panic rising. But even before I sought translation, I knew. It was a vow written not by my will, but hers. I carried the notebook to Professor Zhang. His eyes darkened as he read, lips moving silently along the words. "What does it say?" I demanded. He closed the notebook gently, as though handling something poisonous. "It is the groom's pledge, a vow of binding. You have written your acceptance." "I didn't choose this," I snapped. His gaze was heavy. "Choice is a fragile thing in matters of the dead. To her, the act of writing is enough. She will see it as consent." I shook my head violently. "No, there must be a way to undo it. Some ritual, some prayer." "There are rituals," he admitted, "but they are not without risk, and many who attempt them fail. The bond between you is not paper, not words. It is river and shadow. It is already too deep." The professor suggested I leave the city, as he had before. "Distance may weaken her," he said, though his tone carried no conviction. So I tried. That evening, I boarded a train heading south, away from the Han, away from Seoul. The city lights blurred into the distance, the hum of the tracks a lullaby of escape. But escape was a lie. Halfway through the journey, the train slowed for a crossing. Outside the window stretched a river, not the Han, but another, smaller. Still, the water shone black under the moonlight. And there, standing on the opposite bank, I saw her, the bride. Her gown rippled, though no wind touched it, her hair veiling her face. She stood motionless, yet her presence burned through the glass, through the night, into me. And though the train was moving, though the river was wide, I felt her breath against my ear. The groom does not run. The lights flickered. For an instant, the carriage was empty. Every passenger gone, every seat hollow, save for mine. And beside me, she sat, wet, cold, waiting. I blinked, and she was gone. The train roared forward again, full of life, passengers stirring as though nothing had happened. But in my lap lay the veil. I returned to Seoul that same night, defeated. When I entered my room, I found it prepared. The desk had been cleared, the floor swept. In the center of the room stood 2 candles, unlit, waiting. And on the wall, written in dripping strokes of water, were words in English. "The groom's place is ready." Sleep refused me, but dreams came anyway. In them, I stood once more on the Han Bridge. Lanterns lined the path, brighter now, casting long trails of light across the Black River. At the center, the altar had grown, larger, grander, dressed in crimson cloth. Offerings filled the table, fruit, incense, bowls of rice, and beside it, 2 figures waited. One was the bride, unchanged, her veil of hair concealing her face. The other was a man in white robes, faceless, his presence more shadow than flesh. He raised his hand in a gesture of welcome, his voice echoing through the bridge. "The groom has arrived." The bride stepped forward, slowly, deliberately. In her hands, she carried the veil. She lifted it toward me once again, and though I fought, though my body shook with resistance, my hands rose of their own accord. I reached for it. I placed it on my head. The faceless officiant's voice thundered through the night. "The vow is made." I woke choking, gasping for air. My bed was soaked as though submerged, sheets heavy with water. And across my chest, pressed into my skin, was the mark of fingers. Slender, cold, unyielding. Not the mark of a threat, the mark of a claim. I understood then, I was no longer merely haunted, I was already part of the ritual. And whether I wished it or not, I was standing in the groom's place. The nights grew shorter after that, or perhaps time itself twisted. I could no longer tell dream from waking, shadow from flesh. The veil appeared on my pillow whether I touched it or not. My notebook filled with words I did not write. And always, always the sound of water followed me, dripping from the ceiling, seeping beneath the door, echoing in my lungs. It was not haunting anymore. It was preparation. On the third night the call came. I had left the window open for air. The city lights blurred across the glass, and beyond them, the Han lay dark and endless. Then I heard it, her voice not in my ears but inside the marrow of my bones. Come, the vow waits. When I turned, the veil was already in my hands. I don't remember walking down the stairs, don't remember crossing the streets, yet I found myself standing at the entrance of the bridge. Midnight air pressed against my skin, thick with mist. The city's noise seemed to fall away here, leaving only the hush of the river below. And there she stood, the bride. At the center of the bridge, lanterns burned in perfect rows, their flames unwavering though the wind blew. The altar waited once more, dressed in white and red. Bowls of rice steamed, though no fire warmed them. Incense coiled upward in impossible patterns, spelling words in smoke that vanished before I could read them. She turned toward me. Hair veiled her face, dripping, alive. The hem of her gown left a trail of water that never dried. She lifted her hand, and though the distance was long, I felt her fingers on mine. My body moved forward without command. Each step echoed like a drum beat in a funeral procession. At the altar, the faceless officiant waited, his robe whiter than bone. His voice carried like thunder across the silent river. The groom has arrived. The crossing begins. The bride lifted the veil. This time I did not resist. My hands rose, trembling, and together we placed it over my head. Cold pressed against my scalp, water soaking down my face, but beneath it the world grew sharper, brighter. Through the fabric I saw her face for the first time, not monstrous, not grotesque, but pale, sorrowful, eyes black with centuries of grief. A woman abandoned, a bride denied. Her lips moved soundlessly, yet her pain was louder than any scream. The officiant raised his hands. Speak the vow. My mouth opened. Words spilled out in Korean, syllables I had never learned. They cut my throat like glass, yet I could not stop. Each word bound me tighter, stitching me into the ritual. The bride repeated after me, her voice low and steady, until the last word fell, and silence devoured the bridge. Then the officiant lowered his hand. Cross. The altar split open. The boards of the bridge shuddered and parted, revealing the black water beneath. It rose upward, a wall of liquid shadow, and within it I saw faces, dozens, hundreds, pale and gasping, mouths open in eternal cries. Drivers, passengers, victims, all those who had crossed before me. The bride took my hand. Her fingers were cold yet soft, almost tender. She stepped forward into the rising water, and I followed. The river swallowed us whole. Darkness, pressure, silence broken only by the beating of my heart. Yet within the current, visions swirled, her memories, her pain. I saw a wedding procession long ago, lanterns trembling in storm wind. I saw her carriage topple into the river, guests screaming as water consumed them. I saw her hand reaching upward, grasping for a groom who never came. And then I saw myself, my own face, not as I was, but as she imagined me, her groom, her salvation, her eternal companion. I tried to fight, tried to scream, but the water pressed into me, filling my lungs with silence. The vow burned in my chest. My body weakened. My thoughts splintered. And just as the last of my breath escaped, she pressed her lips to mine. Cold, endless, binding. Her voice filled me like the river itself. Now you are mine. Now the crossing is complete. I woke on the bridge, alone, soaked to the bone. The city lights shimmered faintly at the edges of my vision. Cars passed as though nothing had happened. The altar was gone, the officiant gone, but the veil remained, draped across my shoulders. And in my chest, deep where no breath could reach, her vow pulsed like another heartbeat. I had not escaped the ritual. I had finished it, and from that night forward, I knew. I was no longer just myself. I was the groom of the Han River bride. At first, I thought I had survived. The morning after the ritual, I told myself it was only a dream, that the wet veil on my shoulders, the ache in my lungs, the words carved into my skin were all inventions of a sleepless mind. But the lie crumbled quickly. I tried to eat breakfast. The rice tasted of river water, each grain swollen, bitter. I poured tea and it turned cold before it touched my lips. In the mirror, I noticed my reflection lagging, moving a fraction of a second after I did, as though something else wore my shape. And when I spoke aloud, testing my voice, another whispered beneath it. A woman's voice. Her voice. The city itself seemed different. On the subway, passengers leaned away from me, though I had said nothing, done nothing. At night, children cried when they passed me on the street, clutching their mothers tightly. Dogs barked. Candles guttered out when I entered a room. I was not alone anymore. She walked with me, unseen but not unfelt. Sometimes I caught her reflection in windows, a bride in white standing just behind my shoulder. Sometimes I heard the faint clack, clack, clack of her wooden shoes following me up stairwells. And once late at night, I woke to find my own hands brushing my hair back, though I was not the one moving them. I returned to Professor Yang in desperation. He studied me silently for a long time, his face pale. "You've crossed," he said at last. I nodded. "She will not leave now," he continued. "You are bound. You are her husband in death, even as you breathe. There must be a way to sever it." He shook his head. "To sever a marriage is to betray, and betrayal is what created her curse in the first place. Do you understand? If you abandon her now, she will not merely haunt you, she will consume you." His words struck like a sentence passed. That night I dreamed again, not of the bridge, but of a house, a traditional Korean home, its paper walls glowing with lantern light. I sat inside at a low table. Opposite me she sat, her veil lifted just enough to show her lips. She poured rice wine into 2 cups, her movements graceful, practiced. When she handed me the cup, her fingers brushed mine, cold yet tender. "Husband," she whispered. The word burned me more than fire. I woke gasping, the taste of rice wine still on my tongue, though no bottle stood in my room. And beside me on the pillow lay a single strand of her hair, tied in a knot, as though binding us tighter. The days blurred after that. I no longer trusted which thoughts were mine, which desires belonged to me. When I passed a bridal shop, I stopped without meaning to, staring at the gowns. My heart beat with longing, though I could not say if it was my own or hers. At the river's edge, I caught myself humming an old wedding chant in Korean, a language I did not speak. Worst of all, I began to forget. Forget small things, my address, my phone number, the names of people I had known for years. But I remembered her, always her face, her sorrow, her vow. It was as if she was replacing me, thread by thread, until I was only a vessel wearing the mask of a man. One evening I looked into the mirror and found her instead. Her pale face stared back, eyes dark and bottomless, veil dripping over my features. When I moved, she did not. She only smiled, a sorrowful curve of lips. "Soon," she whispered through the glass, "you will be mine entirely." I smashed the mirror, but shards reflected her still. Each fragment showed a different angle of her face, all watching, all waiting. I knew then, I was no longer just haunted. I was becoming her husband in death, and perhaps, in time, nothing else. The river called me back. It was not a choice. It never had been. For days I had resisted, hiding in narrow streets, in crowded cafes, trying to drown her voice in the clamor of the living. But the city itself seemed to conspire, each road bending toward the water, each shadow pointing to the bridge. By dusk, I was standing at its edge once more. The Hans stretched black and endless beneath the fading sky. Lanterns flickered along the span, though no one had lit them. The air smelled of damp silk and incense, heavy, suffocating. This was not the city's bridge anymore. It was hers. I carried with me only two things, the veil and the notebook, one given by her, the other claimed by her. Both now stained with river water, both bearing words I never wished to speak. The bridge was empty of cars, empty of people. Time itself seemed suspended, the world retreating so this ritual could unfold without witness. At the center she waited. The bride. Her gown was whiter now, though the river still dripped from its hem. Her veil of hair parted just enough to reveal her lips, curved in a smile that was both tender and terrible. "Husband," she whispered, though no sound carried. Her voice bloomed inside me, filling my lungs, my veins. I stepped forward, though my legs trembled. The altar had returned, grander than ever. Bowls of rice, fish, fruit, all glistened with moisture, untouched by rot, though they had no right to be fresh. Candles burned in defiance of the wind, their flames pale blue. And the officiant waited once more. His faceless head turned as I approached, and his voice cracked like a bell. "The vow nears its completion. Tonight, the union seals." The bride lifted her hand toward me. The veil quivered in my grasp, alive, yearning to return to her. But in that moment I hesitated. I remembered Professor Young's warning. To betray her now would be dangerous, but to surrender would be worse. It would mean giving up the last shred of myself, becoming nothing more than her echo. I stood at the altar with the veil in my hands, my mind torn. One path promised death, swift, merciless, but mine. The other promised eternity, but not as myself. The officiant's voice thundered again. "Choose. The living cannot linger between worlds." The bride's lips parted. Her eyes met mine for the first time. Unveiled, dark pools that pulled me under. I saw in them the truth of her sorrow, a bride drowned on her wedding night, abandoned by the man who was meant to keep his vow. And I understood. Her curse was not born of hatred alone, but of love twisted into grief, grief that demanded repayment. Her hand trembled as she reached for me, not wrathful, not cruel, only desperate. "Husband," she whispered, "do not leave me again." The veil in my hands grew heavy, my lungs filled with the scent of river water. Around us the bridge groaned, the river rose, and the faces of the drowned pressed against the surface, watching, waiting. I realized then that my choice was not only mine. If I refused her, she would not vanish. She would find another, and another. The cycle would continue until some man finally gave himself to her. If I accepted, perhaps the cycle would end. Perhaps the river would rest, but at the cost of myself. I placed the veil halfway onto my head and stopped. The officiant leaned forward, faceless, expectant. The bride's eyes shone wet with hope, and behind it, terror. The river swelled higher, the bridge trembling as if it would break. My heart thundered, my mouth opened, and I spoke words I did not know I carried. "If I am to be yours, then take me whole. But if you take me, you release the others." The officiant stilled. The bride's hand faltered. The drowned faces below writhed, whispering. For the first time the ritual paused. The candles flickered. The lanterns swayed. The veil quivered like a living thing, suspended between my hands and her waiting grasp. It was then I knew the end would come tonight, whether in betrayal or in surrender. The veil trembled in my hands like a living heart. Her eyes, dark wells of sorrow, searched mine, pleading, demanding, waiting. Behind us the officiant loomed faceless and still, his voice ready to carve judgment into the night. And beneath us, the Han boiled, the drowned whispering, reaching, waiting for release. The bridge was no longer wood and steel. It was an altar suspended between two worlds. I raised the veil. Her hands twitched forward, desperate, trembling. "Choose," the officiant commanded. His voice was thunder and stone. For a moment I thought of escape, running, breaking free, denying her claim. But the river growled below, and I saw the truth in the water. She would never stop. She would call another, and another. The cycle would devour them all, and if I accepted, the curse might end. My heart pounded with terror, but also with something else, a weight of pity. She had waited centuries, alone, in grief that drowned even death. Could any soul survive such sorrow without turning monstrous? Perhaps my surrender was the only way to quiet her grief. I placed the veil upon my head. At once the world shifted. The bridge disappeared, swallowed by darkness. Only lanterns remained, floating above black water. The bride lifted her veil of hair, revealing her full face, pale as moonlight, eyes endless as the river, lips trembling between smile and sob. She touched my chest. Cold seeped through skin, bone, blood. My heart faltered. "You are mine," she whispered. The officiant's voice boomed. "The vow is sealed." The river rose to claim us. Faces pressed from the depths, gasping, crying, then breaking apart like mist. One by one they dissolved into light, their chains severed. The drowned were freed, all but me. I sank with her into the water's heart. Darkness closed in, heavy, absolute, but within it, her hand held mine. Her sorrow bled into me, and for the first time I felt its full weight. The storm, the carriage tumbling into the river, the betrayal of the man who left her waiting at the altar. "I waited," she whispered. Her voice broke. "So long, too long." Her tears mingled with the river, but her smile trembled with peace. For the first time she was not alone, and for the first time, neither was I. When I opened my eyes, I was back in my room. The veil lay across my chest, heavy with river water. My reflection in the mirror no longer showed only me. Her face hovered just behind mine. Softer now, less shadow, more woman. She did not vanish. She would never vanish. I was hers, husband to the dead, groom of the Han, and when I breathe, I feel her breath join mine. When I sleep, I dream her dreams. When I walk the city streets, lantern light flickers, though no festival burns. The curse is ended for others, but for me, it has only just begun. Sometimes late at night, I return to the bridge. I stand at its center, veil clutched in my hands, and listen. Cars pass, unaware. The city hums. Life continues. But in the silence between heartbeats, I hear her wooden shoes upon the boards. Clack, clack, clack. Closer, always closer. And I know she walks with me, now and forever. The river's bride, the river's curse, the river's husband. Thanks for watching the whole video. Please give me a like and subscribe to the channel to watch more interesting stories.